We start with the search for Newt Gingrich. John Harris is editor-in-chief of Politico, and David Corn is Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones Magazine and an MSNBC political analyst. Two greats on the show. Thank you, David. Thank you, John. A big day for polls today, and none more stunning than this new CNN opinion research poll that shows Newt Gingrich has jumped from 8% to 22% in less than a month. He's now neck and neck at the top with Mitt Romney, while Herman Cain has dropped more than 10 points. So basically, a switcheroo, John Harris. Cain has lost his place to Newt. What's happening?
Well, it shows that there is a group of shoppers in the Republican Party who is shopping for anybody but Mitt Romney. That's been the case for the past 6 months. We've seen it, various people go up and down. As Cain is now facing some trouble in polls, a Politico George Washington University poll found his support eroding, especially as people learn more about the sexual harassment allegations. We've seen them shopping for somebody else. Newt is clearly the beneficiary of that.
David Corn, your thoughts on this, because Newt is generally considered to be persona non grata as far as something like the American presidency is concerned. If you talk to people in Washington, it's just unimaginable that he could be president of the United States for those who know him. But they all know he's smart, but not presidential. But here's my question. Is this what John's saying? It's not a question of picking a president. Yeah. It's basically finding another way to say no to Mitt Romney.
Well, I'm still reeling from your image of Newt in Lincoln's bed. But we'll put that aside.
Well, he gets to sleep there if he gets the White House.
I know, but it's like I feel like we're in Walmart where they go special, the announcements. Shoppers, we have a special in aisle 7. It's another non-Mitt Romney candidate. Check it out. I mean, listen, to win in politics, you still need money, organization, seriousness, and finally to be able to survive scrutiny. Newt Gingrich cannot. He's as much of a flip-flopper as Mitt Romney is on cap and trade, climate change, on mandates, on the Paul Ryan budget plan. A lot of evangelicals say that he has one ex-wife too many. I mean, he's a beneficiary of this anti-Romney sentiment that has been conveyed on one candidate after another. But as soon as those candidates come into the spotlight and under the glare of scrutiny, they all wither. So he seems to be next in line for this.
John Harris, and I don't like to get too personal here, but as far as public officials go, basically people look at Newt Gingrich and they wonder, I think, like you wonder, why I wonder, is there a statute of limitations on being Newt Gingrich? I mean, basically he gets rid of the earlier marriages, he gets rid of his earlier religions, he makes all these changes, which are fair game. But at some point, your identity, is that changeable? Can you stop being Newt Gingrich, the guy who was basically a troll in this town for years, basically an attack agent against Jim Wright so he could get the speakership? He called everybody corrupt but him. Turns out now he's a lobbyist, a serial married guy. What, doesn't the religious right count anymore? Doesn't the anti-Washington fever count anymore? He's the ultimate Washington insider, and now he's moving up in the polls. John?
Chris, a couple things I'd say about that. One, what David says might be true, and I happen to agree with it, that there tends to be the candidates looking for flavor of the month or what have you. But you have to say Newt Gingrich is clearly a much more substantial, accomplished figure over a long period of time than these other people who've been the candidate of the month. Now, that long history he has, as you point out, Chris, has got pluses and a lot of minuses. I think what Gingrich would need to do is to put that long history in some kind of narrative of personal growth. That's what Nixon did in '68. There was a new Nixon. Of course, it turned out the new Nixon was a lot like the old Nixon.
Yes.
Maybe more extravagant comparison, but would be Winston Churchill, who had been on the scene for 40 years, seen as an erratic, unreliable figure, but then somebody who the man met the moment. I think Gingrich would need to say, hey, you know me, you know my pluses, you know my minuses, but you've seen growth, and I'm somebody that's ready for this moment.
Can you see it, John?
Well, that would be a stretch because I see in Gingrich's career more continuity than growth.
Yeah.
The Gingrich that you see now doesn't look, to my eye, look much different than the Gingrich who sprang upon the scene in the 1980s. Very attack-driven, prone to disorganization, always interesting, but more surprises than most people want in a presidential nominee. But that's the case he would need to make.
I think a key
if he wants
word,
to bottle this polling, he'd need to say, look, this isn't just something effervescent. This is real, and I'm here to make a serious case that I should be president of the United States.
John, you've watched you watched Newt Gingrich as long as I have, and you've talked to people who have worked for Newt Gingrich over the last few decades, and they all say that he is really not prone to changing his basic ways. He may change his family, may change his religion, but they always talk about how hard he is to handle, about his erratic streaks. He decides one point in his career he's going to be statesmanlike, and then the next point he decides to be a mean, mad dog attack machine. He just can't really get into a consistent, steady place. And Chris, you and I talked about this not too long ago. He has a very sharp, mean streak that comes out again and again in politics.
Okay, but people aren't stupid,
Do Americans want that in a president?
People aren't stupid. I think they do try to find a reason, a safe way through this difficult time we're in. And that includes conservative Republicans. They're trying to find a rational way away from Obama. Back to you, John. You said something really smart about growth, and I do think that's what people look for. They look for it in President Obama. Most people who like Obama, and I like him, are hoping that he will be able to demonstrate by next year growth, that there are things he may have done differently if he'd done them again and he had a chance to do them. The second term will be better than the first because of his maturity, that politics is, as Arthur Schlesinger once said, a learning profession. You have to keep learning it and getting better at it. I want to go back to that. The two candidates who are doing the best right now in the polling are experienced. That's Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich. I think you're on to something. Let's take a look at the new NBC Wall Street Journal poll. It went back and contacted over 100 Republicans who were polled earlier this month to see how their views have changed. In that re-survey, as we're calling it, we found Romney was up 5 among his group. Kaine was down just 1 point, but Gingrich climbed 5 and Perry dropped 4. So, John, people are trying to gain experience on these candidates, too, as well as looking for growth and experience. So this is a learning process. What are the voters learning now that they're looking for? What do they want besides an alternative to Mitt Romney, at least?
I think they're looking for somebody that can unite the conservative wing of the party and yet also be credible. Michelle Bachmann was interesting because of her conservative rhetoric that caused a lot of conservative hearts to go aflutter, but ultimately she didn't pass the credibility test, the plausibility test. So they're looking for somebody whose ideology resonates, but who seems ready to carry the party's banner a year from now, who passes that credibility threshold.
Well, here's a rational statement by Herman Cain, David. I want you to react to this because I know you will have a strong reaction. I'm not that impressed, except that it does have a certain inner consistency. He's learned to talk like a typical Republican conservative, not in that sort of both-way, wrong-way Cargan way. He likes to talk. Here's Herman Cain saying in the GOP debate this Saturday night that he didn't believe in torture, but that Watergate, there's a slip, waterboarding was okay with him. Bachmann agreed that waterboarding should be used, while Ron Paul and John Huntsman called it torture. Here's Cain's explanation. Let's listen.
I believe in following the procedures that have been established by our military. I do not agree with torture, period. However, I will trust the judgment of our military leaders to determine what is torture and what is not torture. That is the critical consideration.
Mr. Cain, of course, you're familiar with the long-running debate we've had about whether waterboarding constitutes torture or is it an enhanced interrogation technique.
I agree that it was an enhanced interrogation technique.
And then you would support it as president. You would return to that policy.
I would return to that policy. I don't see it as torture. I see it as an enhanced interrogation technique.
And taxes are enhanced revenue. Anyway, President Obama, not surprisingly, disagreed with Cain. Here he was responding to those waterboarding comments himself.
Waterboarding is torture. It's contrary to America's traditions. It's contrary to our ideals. That's not who we are. That's not how we operate. We don't need it in order to prosecute the war on terrorism. And we did the right thing by ending that practice.
There we go, David. And I have to tell you that people like Colin Powell have different views than people like Dick Cheney. I mean, I'm telling you, this turning it over to the generals doesn't solve your problem. You can get a general, you can get a psychiatrist to say anything, you can get a general to say anything. What a stupid comment.
Well, Cain got it exactly wrong. when he said he would go with what the military says. Actually, the military handbook doesn't include waterboarding. It was the CIA and other intelligence services that used these so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. David Petraeus and others in the military have never used it. So it just really shows that he's not ready for prime time. But then he throws the red meat out because I'll take an issue with what you said a moment ago, Chris. I don't think every Republican voter is proceeding in what you would call a rational, let's find the guy who can win procedure. I think a lot of them want to feel the rage, and they want to feel their candidates express their rage. I don't think that's all of them, but that's why they turn to Herman Cain, who clearly doesn't understand this issue, but they like what he says at the end of his little meandering speech.
See what happens when I try to be generous?
I'm sorry. I can't help you on that one.
You just crushed me. Anyway, thank you. I think we're getting on to something. I think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about generally, especially about his past behavior. Thank you very much, John Harris. What a pro. And thank you, David Corn. You warm my heart when you tell me I'm too right-wing for you.